He came on the show as a legend, but left as the man who changed everything. From the very start, the host kept the tone playful, poking fun at his accent, tossing light jokes about his physique, with humor taking the lead over formality. The audience laughed along. But he remained thoughtful, pausing, then choosing his words carefully. And with just one sentence, everything changed. A talk show meant to be a circus turned into a moment that left everyone speechless. What happened won't leave you indifferent. Watch the video until the end. It was 1994. The world was roaring for action heroes, and none roared louder than Arnold Schwarzenegger. Fresh off the success of True Lies, Arnold stepped onto the glossy stage of The Tonight Show with Jay Leno. The plan was to promote not only his latest film, but something even closer to his heart, the launch of his charity for children affected by war, the Strong Peace Foundation. Dressed sharply in a classic gray suit, Arnold took his seat beside Jay to thunderous applause. His smile was easy, sincere. This wasn't just a promotional tour, it was a chance to speak from the heart. But Jay had something else in mind. With his trademark smirk and cue cards tucked in hand, he leaned forward, ready to charm and jab like he always did. The first few minutes were light, box office numbers, gym routines, Hollywood gossip. Arnold laughed politely. Then Jay leaned back in his chair, cocked an eyebrow, and said, "So Arnold, tell me, when you first got here, could you even say the word California, or did you just grunt and point at a map?" Laughter echoed in the studio. Arnold grinned, awkwardly. The next joke followed quickly. "You grew up on a farm, right? Chopping wood, milking cows, and, what, flexing at chickens until they laid eggs." The crowd chuckled again, but Arnold's smile began to thin. Jay wasn't done. "And let's be honest," he said, flipping to the next card, "you've basically made a whole career playing jocks, tough guys. Ever thought of doing Shakespeare? Or do you only speak in catchphrases like, 'I'll be back'?" Arnold let the laughter settle before responding. Calmly. "Jay," he said, voice low but steady, "I grew up with no hot water. No television. No American dream. Just a dream, mine." The room shifted slightly. The studio lights still glowed, but something more serious had entered the air. Arnold continued, "You know, people often overlook those with accents, strong bodies, or humble beginnings. But it's funny, those muscles carried bricks for my father's roof. And this accent? It learned English word by word, because I wanted to understand, not just be understood." Jay blinked, caught off guard. The audience was silent now, listening. Really listening. Arnold looked around the studio, then directly at the camera. "I'm here to talk about a film, sure," he said, "but more than that, about kids in Bosnia who've lost everything. Homes, families, peace. And I thought, maybe, with my jock money, I could help. That maybe muscles could build more than movie careers." A single clap rang out. Then another. A ripple turning into a wave. Jay shifted in his seat, unsure whether to steer things back to humor or let the moment breathe. Arnold turned back to him. "It's easy to joke about where someone's from. Harder to understand where they're going." Jay chuckled nervously. "That's pretty deep for a guy who told me last year his favorite food was schnitzel." Arnold smiled, but this time, his eyes didn't. "Even warriors eat schnitzel," he replied, and the crowd burst into applause. Something had changed. What started as an ambush of laughter had turned into a lesson in dignity. Jay leaned back, lips pursed, a little surprised, and, beneath the surface, perhaps even impressed. But what no one knew, not yet, was that the interview was only the beginning of that night's story. Because behind the cameras, in the very back row of the audience, sat someone who had a question. One that would bring the entire room to a standstill. And what Arnold would do next, would leave the world speechless. As the applause dwindled, Jay, trying to reclaim his usual rhythm, leaned into another cue card. All right, he chuckled, "let's talk about True Lies. Explosions, stunts, saving the world. You blow things up and then smile while doing it. That's got to be the most Schwarzenegger thing ever." The crowd laughed again, more gently this time. But Arnold didn't seem entirely present. His eyes had shifted, just for a second, to the audience. A young girl, maybe 12 or 13, sat nestled between two older women. Her brown hair was tucked under a knitted beanie, and her small hands clutched a folded envelope like it held her whole world. Arnold's gaze lingered. He had seen that look before, the one where someone is trying very hard not to cry. Jay kept talking, but Arnold had stopped listening. Then the unexpected happened. The girl stood up. At first, people thought she was just shifting in her seat. But she took a step forward, her tiny voice carrying across the studio. "Mr. Schwarzenegger." The crew froze. Audience murmurs stirred. Jay turned mid-sentence, confused. The girl stepped into the aisle. Security glanced toward the stage, waiting for a cue. But Arnold raised a calming hand. "Yes," he said gently, his Austrian lilt softer now. I wrote you a letter," she said. "About my brother. He's in Bosnia." A quiet hush spread through the studio. Arnold's face tightened, just slightly. He rose from his chair, stepping toward the edge of the stage. "Come here," he said, motioning. The audience didn't know whether this was planned, but it didn't matter. The sincerity in his voice silenced any doubt. The girl walked up carefully, trembling. Her hands were shaking as she handed Arnold the envelope. "His name is Elmer. He's only 15. He writes when he can. But it's getting harder. There's no electricity. No clean water. We don't even know if he's still." Her voice broke. Arnold knelt down, not caring about the cameras, the lights, the suit. He took the envelope, looked her in the eyes, and said, "I'll read this. Tonight." Jay Leno stood quietly behind them. His show had turned into something else entirely. Then Arnold looked back at the audience, holding the letter aloft. "This," he said, "is why we do more than just make movies." He turned to Jay. "May I say something? Not about the film. About the foundation." Jay, still speechless, nodded. Arnold faced the camera again. "The Strong Peace Foundation is not just about money. It's about voices like hers. And her brothers. We don't get to choose where we're born. But we can choose who we become. We can choose what we stand for." He turned to the girl. "What's your name?" "Lana," she said softly. Arnold nodded. "Lana, tonight you were braver than most adults I know." He looked back at the crowd. "I've been called many things," he said. "Bodybuilder. Actor. Governor, even. But tonight? I hope I'm worthy of being called human." The audience was silent. Not the uncomfortable kind, but the reverent kind. Something rare had happened on live television. Jay, always the entertainer, finally spoke. "Well, that's the first time a movie promo made me feel underdressed." The crowd chuckled lightly, easing the tension. Arnold turned to Lana. "Will you stay? I'll talk to you after." She nodded. As he walked back to his seat, applause erupted again, this time not for the actor, not for the movie star, but for the man who had silenced a studio with a truth deeper than punchlines. Jay shuffled his cards awkwardly. And then, off camera, he leaned toward Arnold and whispered, "You know, maybe I've been doing this all wrong." Arnold smiled without turning. It's never too late to do the right thing. The commercial break began, but the real story was just unfolding, because later that night, when the show ended and the studio emptied, something extraordinary would happen. And it had nothing to do with Hollywood. That night, after the crowd had gone and the lights dimmed, the letter sat unopened in Arnold's jacket pocket. He didn't read it backstage. He didn't read it in the limo. He waited until he was home. Alone in his study, he poured a glass of water and pulled the envelope out slowly, reverently, as though it were something sacred. The handwriting was young. Slightly shaky. The corners of the page were smudged, as if it had been clutched too tightly, or carried too far. It began without greeting. "My name is Elmer. I am 15 years old, and I used to believe the world was good. But that belief has been taken from me. There are nights I lie awake listening to distant sounds that haunted the night and ask God if he remembers our village. My sister, Lana, got out. I am glad. She does not hear what I hear. She does not smell the ash in the air. I don't write this for money. I don't expect anything. I just want someone, somewhere, to remember me. To remember us. Please, if there is any chance of being heard, tell her I miss her. Tell her I'm proud she escaped." Arnold lowered the letter. His eyes burned. Not because of the words, though they carried pain that cut deep, like silence that refuses to fade, but because of the silence around them. So many unheard voices. So many lost names. He stood, paced the room, and opened the window. The cool Los Angeles air drifted in, far removed from the city scarred by conflict. He turned back toward his desk. The photo of himself with children from his foundation in Brazil caught his eye. He remembered one boy in particular, Mateo, who had once asked him, "Can a strong man make peace, too?" Arnold had smiled and said yes. But now, reading Elmer's letter, that question returned louder than ever. Could muscles matter in a world where bullets did more talking than people? He sat down and pulled out a yellow notepad. At the top, he wrote in bold letters, "What real strength looks like." Beneath that, he jotted names. Contacts. Ideas. He began crafting a list of organizations he would partner with. The Red Cross. Médecins Sans Frontieres. A refugee relief coordinator he once met at a UN summit. And beneath it all, he wrote one more line. Find Elmer. The next morning, Arnold was already on the phone before sunrise. His assistant, Lauren, blinked groggily on the other end of the line. "I need everything we've got. Contacts in Europe, relief groups, old press connections. There's a boy named Elmer. He wrote a letter. We're going to find him." Lauren paused. "You're serious?" "I've never been more serious." "All right," she said. "Let me get some coffee." While Lauren mobilized his team, Arnold appeared on every major news outlet over the next 24 hours, not as a movie star, not as a politician, but as a man on a mission. He showed the letter on air, holding it gently, like it was made of glass. CNN, BBC, even German public radio carried the story. "This isn't about a charity gala," Arnold said during one broadcast. "This is about reminding the world that even in war, there are names. There are children. And those children deserve to be heard." Donations poured in. Letters from other children reached his office by the hundreds. But more importantly, tips started to surface. Someone had seen a boy matching Elmer's description near Mostar. Another claimed a teenager by that name had helped evacuate elders from a damaged medical facility in Gornji Vakov. By the third day, Arnold's private team, working alongside Red Cross volunteers, had narrowed the search to a single district on the edge of Sarajevo. Then came the breakthrough. A nurse from an hidden refuge below an old library sent a coded message to the Red Cross, Elmer. 15. Dark hair. Carries notebook. Lives in basement under library ruins. Watches news when power allows. Arnold stared at the faxed message, the names circled in red. He smiled. We found him. The rescue would need to be handled with great care. Sarajevo was volatile. But the Red Cross had experience. A convoy was sent in under the guise of humanitarian aid delivery. Among their cargo, blankets, medical supplies, and a satellite phone, pre-programmed to call one number. It was nearly midnight in LA when his phone rang. He picked up instantly. There was static. Then a soft voice. "Hello. Is this really Arnold?" "Elmer?" Arnold said, sitting up straight. "Yes. They told me you asked about me." Arnold smiled, breath caught in his chest. "I did. Your sister is safe. She misses you. And she's proud of you." A pause. Then a quiet sob. "I thought I was forgotten." "You were never forgotten," Arnold said gently. "You were just waiting to be found." The next day, Arnold held a press conference announcing Elmer's pending arrival to the US. "We're flying him in within the week. He'll be with Lana again. But more than that, he'll have a future." Lana stood beside him, holding the letter she had first handed him. The media flashed photos, but she didn't look at them. She looked up at Arnold. "You didn't just read his words," she whispered. "You answered them." Arnold nodded, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Sometimes," he said, "words are just sparks. But if you believe in them, they light the fire." And the world? The world was beginning to feel the warmth. The plane touched down at LAX just after 6 p.m. A crisp California breeze met the tarmac, but the moment was anything but ordinary. Dozens of reporters, charity workers, and quietly emotional strangers had gathered near a private terminal, watching as the doors of the Red Cross chartered flight opened. And then, he appeared. A boy of 15, thin and pale, with deep eyes that had seen too much. Elmer stepped carefully onto American soil. His boots were scuffed. His coat was oversized. But his spine was straight, his eyes clear. The world expected a child, but what stepped off that plane was something else entirely, resilience, shaped like a boy. Just beyond the gate stood Lana, clutching a small stuffed bear they used to share. When she saw him, her hands trembled. "Elmer," she whispered. He looked up. They ran. No cameras dared interrupt. No microphones intruded. For a moment, the world held its breath as brother and sister embraced. Tears streamed down Lana's cheeks as she buried her face into his shoulder. Elmer stood frozen, unsure if it was real. Then he whispered, "You kept me alive. Every time I wrote, it was for you." Arnold stood nearby, watching quietly. No applause. No grand announcement. Just the soft, steady echo of something right being made whole again. By morning, the photo had circled the globe, Arnold standing behind the reunited siblings, one hand on Elmer's shoulder, the other on Lana's. The headline read, "From blockbuster to backbone, Schwarzenegger rescues teen from warzone." It sparked a worldwide reaction. In Germany, students organized a letter drive for war-affected children. In Brazil, a village donated half their annual crop to support the Strong Peace Foundation. In Bosnia, even among the ruins, the story reached those huddled in cellars and makeshift shelters. Hope travels fast when it has a face. But the story wasn't over. 3 days after arriving, Elmer sat with Arnold in the charity's Santa Monica headquarters, watching the ocean shimmer beyond the balcony. "You saved me," he said quietly. Arnold shook his head. "No, Elmer. You saved yourself. I just heard you." They sat for a while in silence. Elmer's fingers fidgeted with a pen, he hadn't let go of it since arriving. "What's next for you?" Arnold asked gently. Elmer turned to him. "I don't know. I'm here, but I still feel like I'm back there sometimes. Like I'm not allowed to be safe." Arnold understood. "That feeling doesn't go away overnight. But maybe we can give it a place to rest." He pointed to a wall across the room. On it hung framed drawings from children all over the world, some colorful, some heartbreaking. One showed a village left in ruins, another, a girl offering bread to a stranger. Each one told a story. "Would you like to add something?" Arnold asked. Elmer hesitated. Then he nodded. An hour later, he stood by the wall, thumbtacking his drawing beside the others. It showed 2 children sitting beneath a tree, one holding a pencil, the other reading aloud. Above them, the words, "No one is forgotten if someone remembers." Meanwhile, The Tonight Show was preparing for a follow-up episode that had become the most requested re-airing in its history. But this time, it wasn't the usual slapstick monologue or celebrity gossip lineup. Jay Leno had something else in mind. In a rare move, the show dedicated its first full segment to the story of Lana, Elmer, and Arnold. They played the original footage, the jokes, the turn, the letter. Then a new scene faded in. A soft piano played as Jay introduced the audience to the boy behind the words. When Elmer walked onto that stage with his sister and Arnold, the applause wasn't thunderous. It was respectful. Earned. Jay rose from his chair, walked across the set, and extended his hand, not to Arnold, but to Elmer. "Welcome home," he said softly. Elmer, bashful but steady, shook his hand. Lana clung to her brother's side, radiant and proud. Arnold sat beside them, not as a star, but as a witness. Jay turned to the camera. "Last time, I joked about accents, muscles, and jocks. But what I learned that night is something I'll never forget. Behind every person we think we know, is a life we don't." He glanced at Arnold. "And sometimes, it takes a Terminator to remind us to be human." The audience laughed softly, but it wasn't just humor, it was healing. Then Jay did something he'd never done before. He stepped aside and let Elmer speak. The boy took the mic with trembling hands. He looked out at the sea of faces, cameras, and lights. "I thought I would never see my sister again," he said. "I thought I would die without ever being heard." He paused. But someone listened. A man I only knew from movies. He listened. And because of that, I'm alive. Lana reached over and squeezed his hand. The crowd rose in a standing ovation. Not for spectacle. For truth. Backstage, Jay pulled Arnold aside. You know, I used to think interviews were about making people laugh. But what happened here, it's something different. Arnold smiled. You gave a kid a voice. That's more than a punchline. Jay hesitated. Thank you for not walking off the set that night. I considered it, Arnold said with a wink. But then I thought, what if I stay, and say something that matters? That night, as the world watched two siblings rebuild their lives, donations to the Strong Peace